If you think you know Egypt, you are looking at a mirage. You are looking at the tourist postcard version of history, a sanitized narrative that focuses entirely on the golden masks of the pharaohs and the limestone peaks of the Giza pyramids that scrape the sky. But any geologist, engineer, or honest archaeologist who has worked in the Nile Valley, not for the cameras, but for the raw science, will tell you the same unsettling truth. The Egypt we see on the surface is merely the gravestone. The real Egypt, the city of the gods, lies not under the sun, but deep beneath the sand. There is a mountain of evidence, ranging from the eyewitness accounts of the most trusted historians of antiquity to the ground-penetrating radar scans of the 21st century, suggesting that beneath the bedrock of the desert lies a colossal, multi-level system of structures that dwarfs anything built by modern man. This is not a conspiracy theory born on the internet. It is a reality that has been systematically suppressed by authorities who are terrified of what the world might find if we dig too deep. The story begins not with a myth but with a witness. In the year 448 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus arrived in Egypt. He is often called the father of history, and his descriptions of the ancient world have proven accurate time and time again. When he arrived, the Egyptian priests did not take him to the Great Pyramid of Giza to show him the greatest wonder of their land. They took him south, to the Fayum Oasis, near the pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara. There they showed him a structure that defied all logic. Herodotus wrote, "I have seen it, and it is beyond description." If one were to collect all the walls and great works of the Greeks, they would seem insignificant in labor and expense compared to this labyrinth. The pyramids are, indeed, beyond description, but the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. He described a massive enclosed complex containing 12 palaces and 3,000 chambers. But here is the critical detail. 1,500 of these rooms were above ground, and 1,500 were underground. Herodotus was allowed to tour the upper chambers, which he described as bafflingly complex, filled with hieroglyphs and majesty. But when he asked to descend into the subterranean levels, the priests physically blocked his path. They told him that the lower levels were sacred, the final resting places of the sacred crocodiles, and, more importantly, the kings who were the first to build this place. Note the distinction. The priests implied that the surface levels were for humans, but the underground levels belonged to the first time, the Zep Tepi, the era of the gods who ruled Egypt thousands of years before the first human pharaoh. For centuries, skeptics claimed Herodotus was lying, that such a massive building, a megastructure larger than the Karnak temple complex, could not simply vanish into thin air. They claimed it was a fable. But granite does not vanish, it waits. In 2008, the silence was finally broken. A team of Belgian and Egyptian researchers, known as the Mataha expedition, arrived in Hawara. They weren't armed with shovels and pickaxes. They were armed with high-tech, deep-penetrating ground radar and electrical resistivity scanners. Their goal was to see what lay beneath the sand without turning a single stone. The data they received on their monitors was unambiguous and earth-shattering. At a depth of 10 to 15 meters beneath the surface, the radar revealed a massive, consistent grid. It was not a natural geological formation. Nature does not create perfect grid patterns of walls several meters thick. They had found the labyrinth. The scan images showed a colossal honeycomb of rooms and corridors, stretching out for hundreds of meters, exactly where Herodotus said it would be. It was the archaeological discovery of the millennium. It proved that a massive subterranean complex existed, potentially holding the records of a civilization that predated the dynastic Egyptians. But then, the blackout began. As soon as the results were verified, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, Dr. Zahi Hawass, intervened. Hawass, who had previously stated that the labyrinth was a myth, effectively placed a gag order on the expedition. The findings were suppressed. The Mataha expedition was forced to publish their scientific report in an obscure journal, and the Egyptian government forbade any physical excavation of the site. Hawass publicly claimed there was nothing there, directly contradicting the radar images that showed walls, roofs, and chambers. Why? What is down there that terrified the establishment so much? If it was just a temple, it would be a tourism gold mine. The aggressive secrecy suggests that the labyrinth is not merely a ruin, but a functional facility. Some theories suggest that what lies beneath Hawara is the legendary Hall of Records, a library of knowledge left behind by the survivors of Atlantis, or the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, detailing the history of the world before the Great Flood. The suppression of the Hawara labyrinth is the smoking gun that proves the official timeline of history is being protected at all costs, and that the true legacy of Egypt is a subterranean legacy, waiting in the dark for us to find the key. But if the labyrinth of Hawara is the sealed library of the ancient world, then the Giza Plateau is its active engine room, a site where the evidence for a subterranean civilization is not just a blip on a radar screen, but a physical reality that you can touch, smell, and descend into. For decades, tourists walking the stone causeway between the Sphinx and the Second Pyramid had no idea they were walking over a vertical abyss that drops over 100 feet into the limestone bedrock. This is known as the Osiris Shaft. For years, it was dismissed by mainstream Egyptologists as a minor abandoned shaft from a late period. They were wrong. In 1999, a comprehensive excavation revealed that this was not a simple hole in the ground, but a complex, multi-level machine cut with laser-like precision into the earth. To understand the scale of this, you have to imagine the engineering required to hollow out a skyscraper-sized void downwards through solid rock. The shaft consists of 3 distinct levels. The first level is relatively empty, a distraction for grave robbers. The second level, deeper down, contains a chamber with 6 rock-cut niches. But it is the third level, the bottom of the world, that changes everything we know about Giza. To reach the third level, excavators had to pump out rising groundwater, fighting the very water table of the Nile. When the water was cleared, they found themselves in a massive, rectangular hall. In the center of this hall, surrounded by a moat of crystal-clear water, lay a lonely island of stone. And on that island sat a magnificent sarcophagus made of black basalt. This is the symbolic Tomb of Osiris, the god of the dead and regeneration. But why build a sarcophagus 100 feet underground, surrounded by water? This was not a burial for a human king. No mummy was found. This was a schematic of survival. The layout represents the primeval mound of Egyptian creation myths, the first land that rose from the waters of chaos. It suggests that whoever built this shaft was memorializing a time when the world was destroyed by water, a time of a great flood, and they sought to preserve the seed of civilization deep within the bedrock, protected by the stone of the plateau. But the Osiris shaft is not an isolated bunker. It is a junction box. During the excavation, teams noticed narrow tunnels branching off from the lowest level, heading toward the Great Sphinx. This confirms what local villagers and unauthorized explorers have whispered for centuries. Giza is Swiss cheese. It is hollow. The plateau is honeycombed with natural caves that were expanded and modified by human hands into a vast, interconnected network. Seismic surveys conducted in the 1990s by geophysicist Dr. Thomas Dobecki and geologist Robert Schoch around the Sphinx revealed undeniable rectangular anomalies, voids, beneath the paws and the body of the monument. One specific void, located under the left paw of the Sphinx, measures roughly 9 meters by 12 meters and sits about 5 meters underground. It has right angles. Nature does not make square rooms under lion statues. This aligns terrifyingly well with the prophecies of the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, who claimed in the 1930s that a hall of records would be found under the Sphinx, containing the history of the lost continent of Atlantis. While science rejects Atlantis, the radar data accepts the void. There is a room there, and the authorities have never allowed a camera to be lowered into it. This brings us to the Shemsu Hor, or the followers of Horus. If you go to the Temple of Seti I at Abydos and look at the King's List, or study the Turin Papyrus, the Egyptians themselves tell us their history. They list the pharaohs we know: Ramses, Seti, Khufu. But before Menes, the first human king, the lists go back thousands of years further. They list the reigns of the Shemsu Hor, semi-divine beings who ruled Egypt for over 13,000 years. Modern Egyptologists conveniently draw a line in the sand. They say the human kings are historical fact, but the Shemsu Hor are myth. Why? Because accepting them would break the timeline of civilization. It would force us to admit that the Sphinx and the pyramids were not built by a culture that just learned to stack stones in 2500 BC, but were the legacy of a far older, highly advanced culture that was destroyed by the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas, the rapid melting of ice caps and rising sea levels around 10,500 BC. The water erosion on the Sphinx, vertical fissures caused by thousands of years of heavy rainfall, proves that the monument stood there when the Sahara was a lush, green savanna. That was over 12,000 years ago. If the Sphinx was there, the underground city was there. The theory of the Giza underground suggests that the pyramids are not tombs, but markers. They are geodetic beacons placed on top of the bedrock to mark the entrances to the shelters below. When the sky turned to fire and the oceans rose, the Shemsu Hor did not die. They went down. They sealed themselves in the Osiris shafts and the labyrinths, waiting for the surface to stabilize. The reason we find no mummies of the builders of the pyramids is because they aren't buried in them. They are buried under them, in the real necropolis that we have only scratched the surface of. We are walking on the roof of their world, mistakenly believing we are the masters of the house, while the true history of humanity sleeps in the dark, silent chambers beneath our feet, guarded by the water and the stone. But to truly understand the technological capability of this subterranean civilization, we must travel just a few miles south of Giza to the necropolis of Saqqara. Here, buried deep beneath the burning sands in a tunnel complex known as the Serapeum, lies a smoking gun so heavy that mainstream history simply collapses under its weight. The Serapeum is not a temple, it is a bunker. When the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette rediscovered it in 1850, he found a long, dark corridor carved out of the living limestone bedrock. Lining this corridor were side chambers, and inside those chambers sat 24 gargantuan stone boxes. These are not ordinary coffins. Each box is made of a single block of solid granite or diorite, weighing up to 70 tons, with a lid weighing another 30 tons. That is 100 tons of super-dense stone. The stone was not quarried nearby, it was brought from Aswan, over 500 miles away. How did a Bronze Age civilization with copper chisels and hemp ropes transport 24 100-ton blocks 500 miles? And then, this is the impossible part, lower them into a narrow underground tunnel system with only a few inches of clearance on either side? There is no room for levers. There is no room for hundreds of slaves to pull ropes. The mathematics of leverage makes it impossible to move these objects into these alcoves using primitive technology. But the mystery gets deeper when you look at the boxes with the eyes of an engineer, not an archaeologist. Mainstream science says these were coffins for the Apis bulls, sacred animals worshipped as incarnations of the god Ptah. But when Mariette opened the boxes that hadn't been looted, he didn't find mummified bulls. He found them empty, or in some cases, filled with a strange liquid bitumen residue. Why build a 100-ton, hermetically sealed granite vault for an empty space? The answer lies in the precision. In 1995, engineer and master machinist Christopher Dunn examined the Serapeum boxes with precision instruments. He found that the interior surfaces of the granite were flat to within 2/10,000ths of an inch. That is the precision of a modern optical lens or a space shuttle component. The inside corners were perfect 90-degree angles, cut into a material harder than steel. You cannot do this with a copper chisel and a stone hammer. You need advanced machining tools, likely ultrasonic drills or abrasive saws driven by powered machinery. This leads to the acoustic theory of the Egyptian underground. Granite has a high content of quartz crystal. Quartz is piezoelectric. If you squeeze it or vibrate it, it produces electricity. The Serapeum boxes are dimensionally tuned. If you strike them, they ring like a bell. The theory suggests that the entire underground complex of Saqqara and Giza was not a city of the dead, but a massive geomechanical power plant. The builders understood that the earth vibrates. They built resonant chambers underground to capture specific frequencies of the earth's hum, amplifying them through the quartz-rich granite boxes to create a standing wave of energy. Perhaps this energy was used for stabilization of the tectonic plates, perhaps for wireless power transmission as Tesla theorized, or perhaps for healing the human body, which we know responds to sound frequencies. The sarcophagi were not for dead bodies. They were functional components of a machine that we have forgotten how to turn on. This technological potential explains the intense, almost paranoid security that surrounds these sites today. In 2002, the Egyptian authorities quietly began constructing a massive concrete wall around the entire Giza plateau. It is miles long, equipped with cameras and sensors. They claimed it was to protect tourists and control crowds. But you don't build a fortress wall to stop tourists. You build it to secure a perimeter. At the same time, massive industrial water pumps were installed to drain the rising water table from beneath the Sphinx and the pyramids. Witnesses reported that the water being pumped out was not just groundwater, it was chemically strange, sometimes described as having a metallic taste or smell. Are they just preserving the monuments? Or are they trying to access the lower levels of the Osiris shaft and the void under the Sphinx that have been flooded for thousands of years? The behavior of the military and the government suggests a recovery operation. They know that the gods left something behind. Not gold, not statues, but technology. A technology based on sound, resonance, and the earth itself, hidden in the labyrinthine dark, waiting for the water to recede so the engines can be examined once more. The underground history of Egypt is not about the past. It is about a race for the future, disguised as archaeology. To bring this investigation into the blinding light of modern hard science, we must fast forward to November 2017, when the world of Egyptology was rocked, not by a shovel, but by a subatomic particle. The Scan Pyramids Project, an international mission led by scientists from Japan, France, and Egypt, used muon radiography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to scan through solid rock like an X-ray, to look inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. They were not looking for gold, they were looking for density, and they found a ghost. The data revealed a massive, previously unknown void located directly above the Grand Gallery. This was not a small crack or a construction gap. It was a colossal empty space, at least 30 meters long, roughly the size of a passenger airplane. The scientists called it the Big Void. It has no entrance. It has no exit. It has been sealed since the moment the last block was placed 4,500 years ago. The implications of the Big Void are terrifying for the orthodox timeline. If the pyramid is just a tomb for Khufu, why build a massive, sealed hall that no human was ever meant to enter? The Stargate theory, often dismissed as science fiction, suddenly gains traction when you look at the architecture. The Grand Gallery, leading up to the King's Chamber, is not designed for a funeral procession. It is lined with slots that look like they held machinery or dampeners. If the pyramid was a machine, as the Serapeum suggests, then the Big Void could be the engine room or the resonance chamber, housing the device that powered the complex. When the discovery was announced, the reaction from the Egyptian authorities was instantaneous and defensive. They downplayed the finding, calling it a construction anomaly. They refused to allow a fiber optic camera to be drilled into the void. Once again, the door was slammed shut. But the muons do not lie. There is a room there. And if there is a room there, there are likely rooms under there, connecting the pyramid to the bedrock network we saw in the Osiris shaft. This physical reality of hidden chambers aligns with one of the most mysterious and controversial texts in human history, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Attributed to the Atlantean priest-king Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, these tablets are dismissed by academics as medieval alchemy, but revered by secret societies as the literal history of the pre-flood world. The tablets speak explicitly of the Halls of Amenti. The text reads, "Deep in Earth's heart lie the halls of Amenti, far neath the islands of sunken Atlantis, halls of the dead and halls of the living, bathed in the fire of the infinite all." Thoth describes piloting his ship to Egypt after the Great Waters sunk his homeland, and using his technology to build the Great Pyramid not by labor, but by the power of sound to levitate the stones. He states clearly that he built the pyramid over the entrance to the halls of Amenti to guard them. For centuries, this was treated as metaphor. But now that we have proven the existence of the Osiris shaft, a subterranean hall, and the Big Void, a hidden chamber, the Emerald Tablets read less like poetry and more like a technical manual. The existence of a subterranean intelligence in Egypt might also explain the strange episode of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1799. During his campaign in Egypt, the future Emperor of France decided to spend a night alone inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. He entered the chamber confident and arrogant. He emerged the next morning, pale, shaking, and visibly traumatized. When his aides asked him what happened, he refused to speak of it. Years later, on his deathbed, when a friend asked him once more what he saw inside the pyramid, Napoleon started to speak, then stopped and said, "No, what's the use? You would never believe me." What could terrify a man who had seen thousands die in battle? A hallucination? Or did the acoustic resonance of the king's chamber trigger a contact experience? Did he see the guardians that the legends say watch over the subterranean entrances? It is a historical fact that after Egypt, Napoleon's rise to power was meteoric, as if he had been given knowledge or a mandate from the dark. We must also look at the Osirian at Abydos, a structure that baffles engineers to this day. Unlike the temples built on top of the ground, the Osirian is built into the ground at a much lower level than the surrounding structures, suggesting it is thousands of years older. It is made of massive, unadorned granite blocks, similar to the Valley Temple at Giza. It is constantly flooded with water from the underground table, but carved, or rather burned, into the granite of one of its pillars is the Flower of Life, a complex geometric pattern that represents the fundamental structure of space and time. It is not chiseled. It looks laser-etched into the atomic structure of the rock. How did a primitive culture etch a high-fidelity geometric pattern into the hardest stone on Earth, inside a temple buried 50 feet underground? The Osirian is likely not a temple at all, but the entrance to the southern subterranean network, the sister site to Giza. The evidence suggests that the dynastic Egyptians, the ones we see in museums, did not build these massive underground machines. They found them. They inherited the ruins of the gods who went underground to survive the cataclysm, and they built their mud brick temples on top of them, worshipping the ventilation shafts of a civilization they could not understand, a civilization that may still be humming quietly beneath the waterline, waiting for the cycle of time to bring us back to the 0 point.